Morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Today, we're going to be looking at the changes with regards to SARS e-filing. So today's webinar is not going to take up the full 45 minutes, so there is going to be an opportunity for some questions at the end of the session. So if you do have any questions throughout, just pop them in the question box and I'll go through these at the end of the presentation. So today we're going to be looking at three main aspects. The first being what is a registered representative and updating that on the SARS system. There are a few ways to do this. So we're going to go through all the ways, including the new way that SARS has issued out in April of this year. We're also going to look at how to request tax types on the new system, as well as actioning the tax type release. And then we're going to briefly just look at the legacy system, where to find the old information, and then just the changes in what you're going to be seeing on the screens. So jumping straight into it, what is a registered representative? So this is someone in the organization who's got the full right to act on behalf of another legal entity. So this can be a public officer, an accounting officer, liquidator, administrator, etc. A legal entity can have more than one registered representative. So often, and we'll go through this just now, you'll see on the RAV 01 that there's quite a few registered representatives. However, only one can be nominated as the official representative with SARS. And in some cases, we're seeing that no one has been. And so we're going to go through how to update this with SARS. Firstly, how do we check who the registered representative is? So what we do in this case is, in the usual manner, we're going to just navigate to the RAV 01. So you can just log into eFiling in the usual manner. You navigate to the company that you're wanting to look at. And important to note here that you have to hold at least one tax type to view the registered representative. So if you just hold the shell of the entity on your e-filing profile, you're not going to be able to see who the registered representative is. So as long as you hold at least one tax type, whether that's VAT, customs, PAYE, then you're able to then see who the representative is. Once you've logged into e-filing, you're then going to navigate to organizations at the top ribbon, and then navigate to organizations on the left-hand side, and then to the SARS registered details little tab over there on the left-hand side of your e-filing. Once you've dropped down that, you're going to navigate to maintain SARS registered details. That's going to open up another pop-up box. And you can then, you need to agree to some certain conditions if you've got authority to view this, and a RAV 01 pops up. And on the left-hand side of the RAV 01, what you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen over here is you'll be able to navigate through all the different details of the entity, as well as be able to look at the representatives by clicking on this button. So once you click on the representatives tab, you're going to then see this tab over here that pops up, and this is all the parties that are representing the entity. So as I said, you can have more than one party. So in this case, there are two parties. It will indicate their capacity. One is a public officer and one is a director. Now, this box is an important box. This will indicate whether there is a representative taxpayer registered with SARS. In this case, we can see the representative taxpayer is in the capacity of the public officer, and that's been noted with SARS. Now, if neither of these boxes were ticked, then that means there is no representative with SARS registered on the system, and so one would need to be officially appointed with SARS in order to then activate the tax type transfers by the organization. So if there's no representative, I'm going to show you three options of how to update this. The first option is the RAV 01. So what we've just seen in the previous slide, you navigate to the RAV 01. You then click a tick box of who you want down here as a representative taxpayer. Now, it's not always going to be the case that when you navigate to the RAV 01 that there are going to be any taxpayers listed over here. So in this case, you would need to then add the representative taxpayer and then come and do this tick box. So if there are already taxpayers, if there are already parties registered over here with whatever their capacity may be, and you want to select one of them as the representative taxpayer, you just click the tick box and a new little pop-up opens like this. And this will then ask you, from what date do you want this person to be your representative taxpayer? You then confirm the date of appointment, and a further box is then going to open, and you're going to need to confirm the details of the representative. And this includes their email, their cell phone, their ID, their full address, contact details. You'd need to update that form with all the relevant and correct information. And it's really important that the email and the cell phone are correct and updated. And we're going to see why just now. Once you then are happy with all the information, you're going to save this on your RAV01 and you're then going to submit. Now, SARS is going to request further information. We'll go through the details of that shortly to verify the individual. So an email will be sent to the representative taxpayer that you've just clicked, who's going to now be authorizing all these transfers. They will then receive this email, and the email will break down exactly the information that's required to be sent to SARS, and it will indicate where these can be sent. Now, in some instances, SARS will open up a link on eFiling, but what we're noticing when you're doing it through the RAV01, it's not always the case that a link is open to upload the documentation online. So with the RAV01, what we're seeing is a lot of the time, the documentation has to actually be emailed across to that specific email address for authorization and verification by SARS. Now, it can take up to 21 days for SARS to update the information. In some cases, it's 48 hours, but what we're seeing in most cases, it's more towards the 21 days. Once SARS has verified the information, you can navigate back to your RAV01, and it will have now a tick box tick to verify that that person is a representative with SARS. If you want to skip the RAV01, the second option is you can activate it on eFiling directly, not through the RAV01, but through a separate process. In this case, you've got to do it through the registered representative's eFiling profile. So it can't be done by the tax practitioner or by someone else who holds the profile. It has to be done in the registered representative eFiling profile. So that registered representative who wishes to be formally registered with SARS needs to log into their eFiling profile. In the same way, at the top tab, they navigate to organizations, and they can then click this tick box over here that says activate registered representative. Once they click on that activate registered representative, a further tick box is going to appear and asks, do you want to activate the registered representative or activate as tax practitioner? So in this case, they would tick activate the registered representative. And a further box will appear that says there's either no records being found, and you can activate the new registered representative. If in the instance there's already a registered representative and you're just wanting to update, it will indicate who the current registered representative is. You can then still activate this new registered representative through this manner. It will override the previous person. So what happens then, once you tick that box, it will then say, I, Erin Lee Snyman, being the authorized representative of this company, hereby confirm that I've been duly appointed in this capacity. It lists all my obligations and a further little note there to say that I'm fully aware of my personal accountability in this regard and the consequence of any false declaration. I then click agree and continue. Now, in the same way that previously with the RAV01, an email is going to be sent to me, and it's going to say, you've now been activated. In order for me to be verified, I need to upload the following documentation. Now, through this manner, once I've activated it over here, a link is opened. And so all the supporting documentation can be loaded for approval and verification by SARS through the eFiling portal. So one of the nice things about doing it this way is that that link is opened, so there's opportunity for me to keep monitoring it through this way, rather than having that email trail. So the third way now, and this is SARS's new way of doing a registered representative, this is through their SARS query system. So this has to be completed by the registered representative. It can't be completed by someone else. It must be completed by them. Documents are uploaded when completing this form. So in the previous ones with the RAV01, documents were emailed for verification. In the second option, documents were uploaded through eFiling. In this way, documents are uploaded at the same time before you actually make submission of the form. SARS will take up to 21 working days to verify the details. In some instances, like I said, we've seen the updates within 48 hours, however, leaning more towards the 21 working days. So once confirmed, the representative will then pull through to the RAV01. So this is what the SARS query system looks like when you navigate to this. And if you do need the link, I can always provide it for you. So once you log into the system, it will bring up all of this information, and the registered representative will need to complete the entity details, the representative, their own contact details. They also need to complete their ID and their tax number. Now with this system as well, before making submission, all the documentation is uploaded here, and then you press the submit button. Once submitted, an email is then sent to the registered representative to indicate that SARS has received the request and that they will now be verifying verifying the documentation that has been uploaded here. If SARS is not happy with the documentation, an email is going to be sent to the registered representative requesting further or valid information from them. In this instance, if you're wanting to now check, let's say the 21 days is up and you're wanting to confirm that the registered representative is active on eFiling, you then just navigate back to the RAV01 and you go check my representatives, and it will now pull through the representative taxpayer. The important thing to note here is often the registered representative is someone within the organization and they may not be aware of SARS's processes. So they really need to be on top of those emails that they are receiving for that further information. Because if they don't receive that information in a specified time frame, then this process needs to be completed again. So for all three of these ways, when you're updating the registered representative, you're going to need to provide supporting documentation from the entity. So this would be either your CK documents, your CRR documentation, either a trust deed or any registrations in terms of a partnership, as well as a copy of the identity document of the taxpayer if it's an individual. So that would be the information around the entity. The registered representative would need some form of documentation, whether it's a resolution indicating that they have been duly appointed in the capacity as a registered representative. They'll need to upload their ID document. And then this is an odd one, and this is what we're noticing a lot with SARS when they're wanting to verify these details due to COVID and the branches being closed, is they want an image on the day that the request is submitted, which shows the individual holding up their ID document, and then a further note that reads, update my details, as well as a copy of their proof of their residential address. So before you even proceed with any of these three options of updating the registered representative, I would ensure that all of this documentation is on hand prior, so that it can just run smoothly. As soon as you get that request, all this information can then be sent across to SARS. Okay, so let's say now the registered representative has been active and there was already an active registered representative, and now you're wanting to request some tax types across. So in order to request these tax types, what you do is you log into the SARS system as per usual. You'd navigate to the specific entity that you're wanting to request the tax type profiles for. You'd then click the organization tabs on the top ribbon, organization tab on the left ribbon, and navigate to manage tax types over here. Now below here, you can see these legacy tabs. So you've got legacy for the activation, for the transfer, and the pending registrations. Now all you can do in here is you actually can just open and see. So you'll just open and you'll see how you historically used to request the tax type transfers, and you can see previous authorized or cancelled or declined transfers and any pending registrations, which obviously are no longer valid. So there's not much you can do here but view. If you had to re-request anything, you would need to use this new manage tax types tab over here. So once you do manage tax types, this pop-up box comes up and you'll be able to see all the various different tax types held for the organization. Now, the status of the tax type is going to change. In some instances, it might say not active, which just means it's not registered for that specific tax type. In some instances, it might say successfully activated, which means you hold the tax type. Or in this instance, it will say it's not active, but it's active with another party, which means you can request that tax type transfer across to you. So what you would do is you would put in the reference numbers and then click the request tax type transfer box for each of the tax types you want. And then you'll click the submit button, which is at the bottom of this box. Now, you don't have to do these individually. You can do all of these tax types at the same time. You just put in the reference number for all the tax types you're wanting, click the request tax type box, and then submit it. You don't have to do this one by one. Now, for releasing the tax type, this is where the major change has come in with SARS, and it's caused a lot of confusion. Previously, you would have noted that if, let's say, I held the eFiling profile for, let's say, PAYE, and another company wanted to request it over, they just did the request, messaged me, and I would release it on my eFiling profile as a tax practitioner or the accountant for that organization. That's no longer valid. The releasing of the tax type can only be done by the registered representative. It's cutting out the middleman of the accountant or the practitioner or whoever holds that profile. So it can only be done by the registered representative of that entity. There's no more override codes issued by SARS. So previously we saw that after the 5 days, if the tax type request wasn't actioned, you could request an override code, and then whoever requested that tax type could then insert that override code, and then the tax type would then become active on their side. So that's no longer the case anymore. As I said, it can only be done by the registered representative. Once it has been requested, as mentioned in the previous slides, it's up to the representative to then action the release. Now, what we have seen is that there's no actual way of the representative knowing that they've received some sort of request to release this tax type. So if you are assisting, you need to just let the representative know that they would need to go and action this release. So in order to do this, this is where we navigate to the sars.gov.za system and browser. We're not using eFiling anymore for this. So they would go to sars.gov.za. This website would pull up here, and you'd go to manage tax type transfers over here. Now, once clicked on the manage tax type transfers, you'll see a tax type transfer box that comes up like this. The registered representative would put in their identification number and the tax reference number of the entity that they are requesting. Okay, now, as in the previous slides, I mentioned that there can be, that you can request multiple. So you can request across PAYE, VAT, income tax, etc. Now, if you're doing multiple requests, then we suggest using the income tax number of the company and just leave off the VAT and the PAYE, because what will happen at this point is it will bring up all the others on the power of attorney, which we'll see in the next few slides. If you are specifically only requesting the PAYE, then of course, then the tax reference number here to use would be the PAYE reference, and same for the VAT. If you are doing multiple, use a company income tax number. If you're not requesting the income tax, then just use either the VAT or PAYE. You might have to do a couple if they're not all coming through on the power of attorney, but I'll show you through that process now as well. So once the registered representative has completed this information, they click the submit button, and a code is going to be sent to them either via their email or their cell phone. So they get asked, would you like to verify using your email or your cell phone? They need to input the code. I believe it's 2 or 3 minutes that they have. Once successful, a power of attorney will pop up. So once this power of attorney pops up, you'll see this is what it looks like. This information is going to be already pre-populated, so don't worry about that, but it's just indicating that in their capacity as a registered representative, they're authorizing the release to the specific tax practitioner who's requested this across. Now you can see here on this power of attorney that there's been a request for an organization income tax as well as a pay-as-you-earn income tax, pay-as-you-earn request. So this person, the registered representative, has got the ability to approve or reject. So they don't have to approve all, they can reject all. So for each tax type, there's going to be a tick box for each. They also then have the ability to print the power of attorney if they want to keep it on their records, and they then press submit. Now, from your side, once they've submitted, you as a tax practitioner, whatever email has been registered under that profile, it's going to be sent to you, and it's just a copy of the power of attorney indicating that the registered representative has actioned the release for these specific tax types. If the request has been rejected, then you'll get a note as well to indicate that that has been rejected. Now, from your side, you can then log back into eFiling, navigate back to the managed tax types for your client or the company, and you're either going to have instant access to those returns, or under the managed tax types section where we saw the status, it will say actioned or authorized, scheduled to run in 24 hours, and you would then have access to this within the next 24 hours. So what we're seeing are some common errors around the request and the release of these tax types. So some of these common errors are a lot of organizations are not aware of who the registered representative is. So in some instances, people think they are aware who it is, but going back a few slides to that initial looking at the RAV 01, there may be multiple registered representatives, but the person who's actioning this is the actual one who's registered with SARS. So it can't be any of the registered representatives. It has to be the person who is the one registered with SARS. Okay, so this needs to be known in order to communicate this to the registered representative so they can then activate the tax types. Now, often we're seeing the registered representative email and or cell phone number is outdated. So again, this needs to be rectified prior to approving, as they need to access the one-time PIN that gets sent back to them. If the email or the cell phone is outdated, then you have to revert back to eFiling to the RAV 01 to then update this. In some instances where the registered representative is no longer in South Africa, then they would need to select their email, or they would need to go and update their cell phone number. But of course, with the text messages and the OTP is not getting sent to foreign numbers, and so they would need to ensure that their email address is updated in order to authorize and action this. And then the other common error is there is actually no representative activated with SARS. So if you came to your tax types and you wanted to start requesting, and we go back to this managed tax types, so we now want to request, we can see there will be an action here that says not available. Now, the reason it's not available, even though it is actually registered with another party, is that there's no registered representative, and so they're not going to even allow you to make this request unless you actually update the registered representative. And in order to do this, you can do it via those 3 options mentioned previously. The other common error is the no pending request is found. So for instance, let's say you've requested this tax type and you've now asked the registered representative, or whom you think is a registered representative, to please go to the SARS.gov website and to action the request. They then input their ID number, they input the tax reference number, and it indicates there's no pending request found. So in this instance, because there's no pending request found, there's a couple of options here. Either this is the registered representative, and they've inserted the incorrect tax reference number over here. So in which case, just try alternative tax numbers if you've requested multiple. If you're confident that the tax reference number is correct and it's still indicating no pending requests found, then you need to go back to the RAVO one to ensure the official nominated representative has been activated with SARS. So if they're not that officially nominated person, then you're going to need to either see who is and redo this process, or activate someone in that capacity. So looking over here, just to go through the legacy system. So previously, the way you would register a new organization was through this process where you'd indicate their company details, and you'd need to obviously match this pretty much exactly to what was on the SARS eFiling profile of the person who currently holds it. So this is now no longer when you register an organization. So the new system is like this. Sorry about that. It's like this, where you navigate to the exact same place, organization, and register new, but you're going to capture the entity details as such. So there's a lot less information that is needed here. Once you drop down the entity type over here, it will bring up the information that's requested, that's requested by SARS, and you can then add the taxpayer. As soon as this is added, you can then go to your tax types to manage those and request those over. In the legacy system, the old tax type requests was as such. You would go to request tax types, you would indicate which tax types you wanted by inputting the number, put a little message if you wanted to, and then request that over. And then the release would happen by the person who held the profile. And if not, you'd get the override code. So that was the old way. The new way that we're looking at is when requesting the tax type, you're able to input as many of the reference numbers as possible, or as that you want, request the activation and submit this. And this is how it's done. Now, once you request this, it will say, pending authorization. So, you're then obviously waiting for that registered representative to activate it on their side. And then managing the transfers and approvals. Like I mentioned, the eFiling system is now no longer. The previous way of releasing the profiles and transfers is no longer. So it has to be done via the SARS.gov website of going to manage tax type transfers and then completing that power of attorney. So that would be the new way. So the old way is no longer. So if there are any questions, so it was quite a short webinar today, so I hope it's been informative and that you managed to get some information from this. So if there are any questions, we'll go to those now. So the first one is, how do we get around deceased estates where we don't have an email or cell access for the deceased? Okay, so for the deceased estate, you would have to have updated the details on eFiling to be that of the executor. So the executor would then have the information to then action those requests on behalf of the deceased estate. That would either be done by the executor or the practitioner who's ever notified SARS of that. So in that case, it would be through the executor that would need to then action this. What do I do if I'm a bookkeeper and I need to select tax types? Okay, so for this, if you're a bookkeeper and you need to select the tax types, I'm not 100% sure of this question when you indicate, what do I do if I'm a bookkeeper and I need to select the tax types? So you'd still be able to navigate to that organizations tab, and you'd still be able to manage the tax tabs through eFiling. Depending if you're working under a tax practitioner, when the release happens, that email authorization is going to go to the tax practitioner's email address rather than to yours personally if you're working under that practitioner. I hope I've answered your question, Janine, but if you've got further information, I'm just not understanding fully if you need to select tax types. Maybe if you just let me know if it's navigating on the e-filing system or if it's through the tax practitioner. Okay, can I use a SARS query form to submit normal PAYE queries? Yes, so the SARS query form online, just the one that I showed you with a registered representative, that is just one aspect of the new forms. There are multiple of these forms that you can use on the query system. So the query system is quite nice with SARS at the moment. So you can still use that to submit the PAYE queries. Okay, the next question, I require access to the dividends tax under the tax type it reflects is activated, but I'm unable to view the old DTR01 or DTR02 submitted and unable to issue new returns. Okay, so it's reflecting as activated at your side. This is an odd one because if it's activated on your side, if you're going to the return section, are you able actually to drop down the dividends tax forms or not at all when you click returns? That would be able to assist me in answering the question. But yeah, if it's activated on your side, you might not be able to see the historical submissions if it was previously done by a previous organization, but you should definitely be able to issue new returns with SARS. Okay, let's see. Are you unable to view any dividends tax returns? Okay, so for that, sometimes with these transfers over, as with the legacy system, sometimes the historical information didn't come through. So this would be the same situation. If you're wanting to view historical tax returns, you might not be able to see that information. If you're wanting to just see the amounts, I'd suggest pulling a statement of account. But if you're not able to issue new returns, then that's a SARS issue. You should be able to at least issue the new returns if you have the activation of that tax type and hold it. Otherwise, it might be user rights that need to be looked at for that one. Okay, to see PAYE admin penalty statements. So this is in the same manner, you just log into the e-filing system. On the dashboard there on the left-hand side, it will say correspondence. There will be a thing that says PAYE maintenance. From there, you can pull up the PAYE admin penalty statements from there as well. Okay, so trying to upload supporting documents for the representative, but it keeps saying the case number and tax number are linked. I made an appointment, they just told me to upload the documents, which wasn't helpful. Nicole, was this on the new system, on the query system? In terms of this, what we have found sometimes with a registered representative on the SARS query system is when we're inputting the ID number and the tax number, it's not linking, in which case an email would have been sent. In this case, if you're doing it on the SARS query system, you haven't really been able to make the submission, okay, on the query system. In this case, I suggest then trying to use the RAV01, because you see for this, we've had this issue before where the tax number of that individual and the ID number are not linked to that specific person, and so they're not allowing us to go forward with that. The other option, depending on the person that's registering as a registered representative, I would suggest seeing if they've been issued a new ID and seeing what's on their e-filing system personally, because previously, I know the last 3 digits of the ID number have changed, in some cases for some people. And so what we have been seeing is that SARS is reverting back to the older ID number, and that seems to have been working. So maybe try that. If that's not working, then I suggest using the RAV01, or actually going onto the registered representative's profile and activating it through that way. Especially if you have access to assist the registered representative, I would go on their eFiling profile, because all the information was already there on SARS. So it's just that one screen that indicates that they're then going to activate, and a link would then be open for you to upload those documents. Regarding the picture holding the ID, how do SARS know that this photo is taken on the day? Can the photo being used taken before and used on another day? I suggest just dating it. So I don't think SARS is going to be picky, if it's a day or two, but I suggest just dating that documentation just to show that, 25th of August and holding the ID and stuff, just so you can use that, and so they can know that you've at least, applied your mind there with the date of the photo. The idea there is that SARS is just wanting to make sure and verify that the person submitting is the person holding the ID, and also the person requesting the update to the details. SARS only allows you one access login. I have a login which I created for VAT. My PAYE is managed by Talk and my income tax, but how do I get access to view the PAYE and without taking control away from the auditors? So you can get sharing rights in order to do this. So you could request a profile where it's a shared profile, where you only look at you only have access to look and not submit. But if you do, I've created login which I've created for VAT, but so if you're wanting to request and view the previous submissions for PAYE and income tax, then I'd suggest you just get sharing rights. So you request it over just with, sorry, now I don't know where your question went. Yeah, so I would suggest you just get shared rights, so shared access, where you can actually just view that information. You don't actually have authority to action anything on that via requesting new returns or doing any action on that. You're literally limited to just having a look at what's happening on the PAYE and income tax. So the control still lies with whoever else is holding those tax types. Lynette, where do I see my approved SDL activation if I did it on the old system and still not active? So if you've requested across the PAYE on the old system and it hasn't yet been approved or authorized, because there's no more override codes, you're going to need to request that activation for the PAYE profile on the new system. So just navigate back to manage tax types and request it again via the new system, and the registered representative will then need to authorize that across to you. Okay, so that's all the questions that we have. I don't know if there's any more. Okay. Admin penalties do not seem to work. Nothing populates this. There's no activation required for admin penalties. So there's no activation required for admin penalties. You still should be able to see it by pulling that statement of account for the administration penalties on eFiling. The only issue currently with SARS on both their new browser and actually doing it, whether it's Chrome or Explorer, is that any disputes, it's not pulling up the dispute system for the admin penalties, but you should be able to still pull up statement of account for that. So we've got a response from SARS that registered have been concluded. We have logged into SARS under managed. It shows profile active. We have requested went to SARS to do manage. It says kindly advise what steps to follow. Okay, so when you navigate to the RAV01, can you see that this registered representative has got the tick box? If so, then are you doing multiple requests under the profile? If you're doing multiple requests, then I would start by just doing, let's say, just do the corporation tax number, activate that, then do the VAT, and do it in a 3-step process rather than trying to do multiple power of attorney. But if you've got that response from SARS saying the details have been concluded, just make sure to go back to the RAV01, because if SARS is concluded on that side, they still need to load it onto the eFiling profile to indicate that that is now the registered representative. Hope that helps. Admin penalty objection functions not working. Yes, that's correct. So the admin penalty is not working. We have been in contact with SARS. They are aware of the functionality that the dispute section for that is not working, whether it's on their browser or through the eFiling system. So they are working on that. So hopefully there will be some assistance there. The responses that we got was to book an appointment and do a dispute through an appointment with SARS and let them load it on their side. So that would be the only other alternative for now, but they are aware of the issue. For PAYE admin penalties, so in order to have a look at the PAYE admin penalties, so if you just log into your SARS browser, and then on your dashboard, just navigate. I'm going to have a look now for you. So under SARS correspondence, there will be, so navigate to the company once you've logged in. Then on the left-hand browser, it says SARS correspondence, drop that down, and there will be a request admin penalty statement of account. Click that tab, and then it will ask you for which tax year you wish to request the statement of account for your admin penalty. Okay, so that's under the SARS correspondence tab. Okay, I think that's all the questions. Are we able to obtain a copy of this recording? I do believe it is going to be made public, so I will find out for you, but I do believe it will be made public to all the attendees today. Okay, great. So I think that's all the questions. I hope that's helped everyone. If there are any other questions, or if you've got specific case scenarios that you're wanting to have a chat to me about, then just get in contact with me. I'll pop my email address here, and we can then assist you with anything that you may have. Okay, perfect. Well, have a good day, everyone. And so for those, I have put my email there. It's tax@hrtalk.co.za. So if you do have any specific queries or questions that I haven't answered, or if you want further guidance, then just pop me a mail, and I'm happy to walk you through that.